Hello there, Metalheads, and welcome to Metal Verbalizer podcast. This time we're gonna talk about a Finnish band called Simulacrum. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and let's get going. The flame of the band Simulacrum was lit back in 1999 when Christian Chrism Pulkkinen started to compose his first awesomeness inspired by bands like Dream Theater and Stratovarius. Those tunes later would appear on the epic debut album with their names Hammerhead and Battle Within. Chrism's real passion for music and piano was first fired up when a friend of his copied a cassette for him loaded with some heaviness like Megadeth, Iron Maiden, and Dream Theater, and much more. The reason for this was that before this cassette, he had only been acquainted with classical music, but on this cassette there were music with piano that was not classical, since it was heavy metal and rock. This really inspired him and motivated him to play and practice, which is awesome because that's what the reason to why we have the awesome band that we actually have today. If I would put my own opinion in this, I like my own little ideas like that, you know. My 5 favorite piano players that are not classical, possibly classically trained, but it has to be the almighty Freddie Mercury of Queen and the all-powerful Sir Elton John. From Elton John. And maybe from now on, the Chrism of Simulacrum might be a new favorite piano player. One thing that is quite impressive is that he did not like his mates in school, because what they did was they started learning songs from the bands that they were liking, like maybe Iron Maiden and Dream Theater, what do I know. But Chrism didn't really want to do that, so he actually started to compose his own stuff already at this point. And the impressive part is that he was only 15 at this point. 15! That's crazy. And these two tracks are the tracks, the two main tracks that he composed at this time. I imagine that he composed a lot more during this time, but 2 tracks in particular were what were going to be Hammerhead and Battle Within, which I mentioned before. And those 2 tracks was actually the starting point for the band Simulacrum, and in my opinion, it was not a bad start, my friends. It was not a bad start. It was actually amazing. I really liked those 2 tracks. It was also during this time that Chrism was joined by his brother on guitar and their bass player Olli Hakala. And I'm very sorry to the band here if I'm completely butchering your names, but I'm trying my best with this. These guys were, but yeah, Chrism, his brother, and Olli Hakala on bass was the founding members of the band at this point. And then it took a few years, and down the road, they were joined by the drummer Markus Vallasvaara and the singer Niklas Broman. This gang of awesomeness later led to the craziness more known as their debut album, The Master and the Simulacrum, which had those 2 tracks, Hammerhead and Battle Within, that we have talked about. And this was released back in 2012. It might have taken a long time to finish the album, which it did. It actually, the some of the recordings they actually did as early as 2007, as far as I know. But yeah, it might have taken quite a long time to finish the album, and probably a lot of trial and error. You know how it is. But as far as I know, and as far as I have understood this album, they actually did everything by themselves. They even took it as far as Chrism, which must have been seriously talented for how young he must have been during this time. He actually mixed and mastered the album himself. and it's actually really well mixed, in my opinion. I really enjoy listening to this album. It's amazing, and the amazingness of this album actually kind of proves in that they printed about 500 copies for this album, and in physical CDs, and they actually sold out. They sold out their debut album, which is just amazing. That must mean that they have done a seriously good job with the marketing to market the album. And back then, I would imagine social media started. I don't really know how much they used social media for marketing, but to market the album when you're gonna release it, it's just so important. And they must have done an amazing job since they sold out their debut. And yeah, you can actually still listen to this album. Obviously, now we have social media, so you can actually buy it as a digital copy, or you can listen to it on Spotify. To support the band, I suggest to buy the album, obviously. But yeah, you can also listen to it on Spotify. So if we go along a few years, all the way over to 2015, their debut was joined in their catalog by an album called Sky Divided. And in their own words, the album was about a classic war of the worlds type of story of an alien race attacking planet Earth for its resources. This album is structured so that they really pay homage to the metal giants, apparently of the 70s and the 90s. I wonder why they didn't really mention the 80s bands, but there might be a good reason for that, or they mean more like there has been more like 70s up until the 90s. I don't know. Might be. Once again, the physical copy actually of this album. Once again, they must have done an amazing job of marketing the album. And probably they're starting at this point since they have sold out albums before. They started to get some listeners and all that kind of stuff. And 2015, now we have iTunes, Spotify, and all that kind of stuff. So they actually, the physical, this is the important part. In 2015, here, we actually iTunes and all of that starts to come up, and Spotify starts to come up. I don't know the exact years that these come up, but we actually had that back in 2015. So actually, to have a physical copy once again sell out must have been a serious like motivation for the bands to continue and make amazing music as they do. And one of my favorite tracks from Sky Divided is the track Broken. I really suggest listening to this because in this track they think a little bit outside of the box, and they have implemented a saxophone together with the heaviness of the rest of the band with the guitars and all of that jazz. You might think that it doesn't really work with a saxophone in metal. That sounds pretty foreign, but it actually really works. It really works. So I suggest you really listening to this track. Even though it's a little bit outside of metal with a saxophone. I love that a band enjoys and trying to think a little bit out of the box and try some different stuff rather than guitar, bass, and drums and vocals as the like traditional style. So yeah, now we're closing in on the production of their latest masterpiece, Genesis. We're almost there, but a few bumps in the road on the way there, obviously, as it usually is with bands. And they had, for example, a change of a drummer. But once again, the amazingness of this band, they are starting to think a little bit out of the box with this band. And they decide to bring in a second frontman, which was decided after a lot of auditions and that kind of stuff to become the singer Erik Kramer. I hope I pronounced it correctly. which complements Nicholas' vocals well and gives them the opportunity to have two different types of voices on different parts of the song. And also, both on the record and live, they can harmonize together, which means that they don't really need to use vocal backing tracks. And that makes playing live shows a lot easier. Because then you don't need to play to a click track necessarily, which is something that they use to timeline backing tracks correctly and that kind of stuff. So, in what way better can you celebrate your birthday rather than releasing a new album with your band? Because that is exactly what Prism did. Because 12th of February 2021, on Prism's 37th first birthday, their latest album Genesis saw the light of day. And this album is also fantastic. Such quality in the music that these guys release. And when it comes to, you usually have a title track in an album with the same name as the album. These guys haven't decided on one title track. That title track has 4 different parts. And that's really interesting because then they have implemented some of these are instrumental and some of them have vocals on it. And it can actually be pretty hard sometimes to create an interesting, like, purely instrumental track and keep the interest of the listener. But these guys are talented. They nailed it with these tracks. And have done such a good job to keep it interesting and done a track that follows a story and all of that kind of stuff. It's amazing. Then you have a track called Like You Like Me, also an amazing track, which have acoustic intro and some parts in the middle of the song, also acoustic, which once again creates a fantastic dynamic in the song, which is really important actually. You can't always be like full on metal and vocals and all like the blast beat and all of that kind of stuff and guitars going 1,000 notes an hour. So it's actually fantastic that acoustic guitar together with everything of the else, the rest of the song is fantastic, and it creates a dynamic which I really like, because that's gonna give those slow acoustic parts are gonna get the heavy parts a little bit more of an oomph rather than it would have had with just electric and metal straight through. So amazing job on that one as well. And all in all, I just gotta say, this band is fantastic. Such talented guys. And I have put a few of their songs in my playlists, and I've listened to their discography. I really suggest that you should do it as well. And yeah, so that's pretty much the story of this band for now. And we're gonna have to stay posted on what they're gonna do in the future. So if you enjoy what we're doing here on our podcast, please follow our socials. And obviously, guys, I almost forgot, you have to follow the band's socials as well. They are on Instagram and all of that kind of stuff. Save their playlists on Spotify and all of that kind of stuff. Or even better, buy their records. And these guys have not paid me to say that. I love their music, and you might too. So yeah, follow our socials as well. And the best part with that is that you can be the one that suggests the next band that we are going to talk about, because we're always searching for new bands to talk about, and we love to talk about these smaller bands and new bands. That's kind of the idea with this podcast, and we want to give them a place where they can be heard. So yeah, I hope I hear from you in our socials, and I hope that we see you guys that you want to listen to our future episodes as well. So Erik's out. Bye for now.